Hello, it's week 24 of season 6 of the Andy Griffith Show. This week's episode title is Eat Your Heart Out. Barney, what's going on this week?
Gooder comes in the courthouse and invites Andy out to lunch at the diner. He's all dressed up in the middle of the day. It turns out he wants to go down there because there's a new waitress there that he likes. He says he already sat beside her when he saw her at the picture show, and then he walked her home. He wants Andy to meet her. Her name is Flora. He wants Andy to talk him up, like how he's the champion hand wrestler at Mayday, and how good he is at hitting the dell at the county fair, and stuff like that.
But Flora seems more impressed with Andy at the diner than she does with Goober. She likes the fact that he's the sheriff and he's unmarried, and she gives him a lot more meat on his plate than she gives Goober.
And the next day, Andy tells Floyd that he's not sure that Flora likes Gooder as much as he likes her. And Floyd says he hopes this don't turn out badly for Gooder. And then Gooder wants Andy to go over to the diner for lunch again to see Flora. And Andy suggests that they just call for delivery, that Flora might miss Gooder if he didn't show up for one meal, that absence makes the heart grow fonder. So Gooder calls Flora and places the order for 2 top roast plates. He tells Andy she sounded disappointed. Of course, Gooder thinks it's disappointed that he's not coming, not that Andy's not coming.
But it turns out that Flora brings the order herself, says she doesn't want them to have to wait for a slowpoke delivery boy, and she fawns over Andy again and ignores Goober again.
And once again, she gives Andy a lot more meat, but Gooder don't pick up on any of this. Later, he says he's decided that Flora is the girl for him. And then that night, Helen and Andy are walking home from the movies. Helen wants to grab a bite to eat at the diner, and Andy says okay, but only once he sees that a guy is working the counter and not Flora. But once they go in, Flora comes out of the kitchen. It turns out she's working too. And she flirts with Andy, and Helen don't like it at all. And Andy realizes he's in trouble, and he insists to Helen that Flora is Gooder's girl.
Later, Goober is talking to Floyd about Flora and says he loves her. And Floyd says, well, move slowly. Floyd's kind of concerned about Goober's getting hurt. And then they see Andy. Everyone sees Andy leave to go crow shooting.
And Flora finds Andy in the woods while he's shooting. She wants to tag along with him. And Andy says, no, it's not a good idea. I've already got a girl. And he walks away. But then Flora fakes a strained ankle to get Andy to carry her out of the woods and drive her back to town. And then she kisses him on the lips right on the sidewalk in front of everybody. And Andy says once again, I've got a girl. This won't do. If you're going to be stuck on somebody, please be stuck on Gooder, 'cause he's crazy over you. That's why he comes over there so much to eat.
And then Goober comes in the barbershop to get a special haircut too, because he's fixing to ask Flora to be his girl. And Floyd tells Goober about the kiss he just saw on the sidewalk.
So Gooder goes over to the courthouse to tell Andy to stop stealing his girl. He wants to fight Andy. And Andy says, I'm not going to fight you. I didn't kiss her. She kissed me. And that makes Gooder calm down and get sad. He says, how come she goes for you, Andy, and not for me? Andy says, don't worry. There are lots of women out there. And then Gooder feels better and says, let's go eat. I'm going to have to run into her sooner or later.
So at the diner, Goober acts all hard to get with Flora. And then finally, Flora asks Goober, did you really hit the bell 18 times at the fair? You certainly must be strong.
And this time, Flora gives Goober more meat and pays more attention to him than to Andy. So it's turning out well for everybody. A little bit too well, actually. Later, Gooder asks Andy to get Flora to stop asking Gooder to marry her.
We'll see you next week for episode 25.